The night is quiet now, and you've chosen to rest. Let the gentle hum of the past guide you across waters older than memory. This story will not demand anything from you. It's a tide that moves slowly, washing over your thoughts. You don't have to stay awake. You don't even have to follow every word. Just let yourself drift, like a carved canoe on a moonlit sea, through a time and place long forgotten by most, but still alive in the rhythms of wind and wave. Tonight, we'll follow the old navigators. Not the ones in dusty books or forgotten tales, but the ones who rose before the sun, felt the wind on their faces, and read the sky like you might read a familiar poem. This is the story of sailing with Polynesian wayfinders, of waking to salted winds and sleeping to the sway of 1,000 tides, of islands that appeared on no map but lived in memory, of voices soft as the sea. Our journey begins quietly, as most do. A canoe rests on a beach of powdered coral and crushed shells. It's been there for some time, not abandoned, only waiting. The hull has been oiled and smoked to protect it from salt and sun. Its seams are stitched with cord made from twisted fibers, painstakingly stripped from coconut husk, then pounded and soaked and twisted again. Each knot is a memory. Each lash of binding carries the weight of instruction passed down not by books, but by mouths and hands and long, wordless silences. You might picture a morning not unlike this one. A pale sky slowly revealing itself above the flat line of the ocean. The canoe is long, double-hulled, with curved prows that rise like twin horns from the sea. It rocks gently in the shallows, tied loosely to a breadfruit tree. Nothing rushes here. The villagers walk slowly. The elders speak rarely. The sea will wait, they say, and so must we. Beneath the shade of pandanus palms, a boy crouches near the prow. His name is not important. Names here are fluid, given and reclaimed depending on the moon, the season, or a single moment of fate. But he's young, curious, and quiet, as is expected. He presses his hand to the carved side of the canoe, tracing the worn indentations left by his grandfather's adze. It's not just wood, it's story. Every line tells of storms survived, fish caught, stars followed, and prayers whispered into the wind. Near him, a man hums a low melody as he sorts coiled ropes. The tune is steady, unhurried, and older than memory. You might think of it as background sound, but it is more than that. It is direction. The melody marks rhythm for movement, not just for tying knots, but for rowing, for hauling sails, for paddling across hours of open water. Even sleep can be measured by song. A dog stirs in the shade. The air smells of salt, old smoke, and fermented taro. The ground is soft and cool beneath bare feet. There is no rush. The canoe waits. In the village, women pluck feathers from a dead bird, gifts for a god or perhaps for a new headdress. Children chase each other between piles of firewood. There is life here, rich, rhythmic, but quiet, always quiet. Even the laughter comes like a breeze, soft and passing. Nobody shouts. Only the wind raises its voice. You might imagine walking along the shore now, tracing the footprints of those who walked before you. The sand is warm, dotted with driftwood and broken shells. Somewhere nearby, someone grinds breadfruit with a stone. The scraping sound is steady, almost hypnotic. Time here doesn't pass so much as it breathes, in and out like the sea. Later, the navigator will come, but not yet. He is still in the house of dark mats, drinking kava and watching the sky. His thoughts are not bound to this island. His mind is already out on the ocean, where the stars will rise tonight in patterns only he can read. He does not use maps. His knowledge is stored in bone and blood, in chants and diagrams drawn in the sand and then erased. He will remember what the wind smells like before it shifts. He will know how far the next atoll lies by watching the flight of birds, by tasting salt on his lips, by the movement of clouds. But for now, all is still. The boy dips a hand into the shallows and watches the ripples move outward, distorting the reflection of the rising sun. He looks at the canoe. Soon, they say, soon the voyage will begin, but not until the wind gives its blessing. And so they wait. Waiting is not empty here. It is preparation. It is memory. It is listening to the quiet and knowing when it changes. The sea teaches patience. The canoe teaches silence. And both teach that some things move only when they are ready. Far out on the horizon, a faint shimmer dances where sea meets sky. Perhaps it's a cloud, or heat rising from the water. Or perhaps it's the echo of a place not yet seen. A distant island felt in the bones before it's ever glimpsed by eye. The navigator emerges from the shadows at last. He does not speak. He simply walks to the canoe and places a hand on the hull. He listens, not for sound, but for something deeper, a readiness, a resonance. Then softly he nods. There will be wind soon. And so begins the long rhythm of preparing. Not with haste, but with care. The canoe is checked again. The lashings are tested, not for tension, but for memory. Each binding reminding the crew of its place, its role, its weight in the journey to come. Bundles are gathered, dried fish, coconut, smoked root vegetables wrapped in leaves. Everything light, durable, nourishing. No metal, no written lists, only memory, passed from elder to apprentice in a slow chain of nods and gestures. Nothing is forgotten, because everything has been remembered 100 times before. The sun rises higher, shadows shrink. A warm breeze begins to stir the tops of the palms. It is not yet time to depart, but soon the sea will open its arms. The navigator lifts his gaze to the sky, where a seabird spirals lazily above. He watches, motionless, then turns to the boy beside the canoe. "Not yet," he says softly, "but soon." The boy nods and does not ask questions. He kneels beside the prow and begins to hum. It is the same melody the man used earlier, the knot-tying song. The rhythm of patience. The canoe listens, and so do we. The wind shifts slightly. The navigator smiles. The canoe is almost ready, and so the journey will begin, but not in a rush, not in a storm of action. Only when the sea gives its silent permission. A breath of air, a ripple of current, a single nod from the sky. It is almost time, almost. And so we wait with them, resting in the rhythm of this morning that stretches into centuries. And the canoe waits still. There are canoes built for speed and battle, made to pierce the water with the fury of warriors and crash through surf with the force of ambition. And then there are canoes like this one, patient, wide-bellied, made not for war but for wandering. It waits not for command, but for harmony. It does not answer to clocks or calendars, only to rhythm, the rhythm of wind, of sea, of sky. And so it waited. The days before departure are not filled with frenzy. They unfold slowly, like palm fronds in morning sun. There is no anxiety in this waiting. There is only readiness, shaped by the soft repetition of preparation. Food is packed and tied with plaited cord. Water gourds are sealed with wax and hung beneath the center beam, where the sun will not reach them. Fish hooks, carved from bone and pearl shell, are wrapped in cloth and stowed in hollow bamboo tubes. Each object has its place, and each place has its purpose. The crew is small. 6 men, 2 boys, and 1 woman. The healer, whose chants are needed on long crossings. Not every voyage carries a woman, but this one will. The sea can be unpredictable, and dreams more so. Her presence is quiet but anchoring. She carries herbs wrapped in tapa cloth and whispers to them at night. The navigator rises with the stars and sleeps with the dawn. He is not old, but his hair is streaked with white, bleached by salt and sun. His eyes seem to see past the horizon. At night, he walks barefoot along the beach, marking the constellations with his fingers. You might picture him drawing invisible lines across the sky, mapping a path no one else can see. He never brings a torch. He does not need one. Each night, the ocean breathes a little deeper. The waves stretch longer, and the air begins to carry the scent of far-off currents. The crew gathers each evening beside the canoe, not to talk, but to listen. The navigator speaks softly, if at all. His presence is lesson enough. The younger ones sit cross-legged on mats, absorbing without effort, learning without words. The boy, the same one who traced the carvings on the hull, now stands with the others. He does not yet know the stars by name, but he feels them. When he closes his eyes, he can almost see the dark shape of the next island, though he has never left this one. During the days, the canoe is pulled further into the water, inch by inch, as if coaxing it from slumber. The tide lifts it gently, not yet enough to set it free, but enough to remind it of movement. It rocks, creaks, and sighs like something alive. Children come to lay their hands against its side, offering silent wishes or simple touch. The canoe is part of them. It is not a tool. It is kin. On the fourth day, the wind changes. It comes not from the land, but from the sea. A long, low breath that carries unfamiliar scents. Minerals, wet wood, something sweet. The navigator nods, and the crew prepares without question. The waiting is over. Departure comes at twilight, as shadows lengthen and the birds fall quiet. There is no ceremony, only movement. The canoe is eased into deeper water with the help of many hands. The villagers do not weep, because departures are not endings. They are continuations, the long breath of a people who have always moved with the tides. You might imagine the canoe gliding silently from shore, the paddles dipping in perfect unison, barely making a sound. The water parts gently, as if welcoming an old friend. The crew speaks little. There will be time for talk later. Now there is only rhythm, paddle, lift, slide, breathe. The sky grows darker. The stars begin to emerge. One by one, the familiar shapes take their places. The navigator watches, unmoving. He does not use charts or compasses. His map is alive. It rises with the moon and moves with the swell. The boy paddles at the rear. He is small, but his strokes are steady. He watches the back of the man before him, matching his rhythm perfectly. He feels the canoe respond, almost imperceptibly, to every motion. He begins to understand why everything matters, why the bundles must be placed just so, why the ropes must not creak, why the boat must wait for wind. There is no song yet. That will come later, when the stars have shifted and the course is set. For now, there is only listening to the splash of paddles, the rustle of wind in the sails, the low breath of the ocean as it rocks them deeper into the night. The island fades behind them, swallowed by distance and darkness. No one looks back. They carry the island within them, in their memories, their chants, their bundles of food and cloth. The sea ahead is vast, but it is not empty. It holds stories older than language. The navigator listens to the current and shifts slightly. The canoe adjusts its path. The stars are brighter now, reflected in the gently rippling water. The night is cool, but not cold. The woman hums a soft chant, something without words. It blends with the movement of the boat, with the sigh of the sea. You might imagine it as a lullaby sung not to the crew, but to the ocean itself. Far ahead, the navigator senses a change. Not in the stars, but in the feel of the water beneath them. He closes his eyes, tasting the air. There is something there. Not land, not yet, but promise. The boy watches him, and though no words are exchanged, something passes between them. Understanding, perhaps, or trust. The canoe glides on, steady and sure, and the wind at last has found its way. Night stretches across the sea like woven cloth, thick and full of quiet. The sails creak gently as they shift to catch the wind, the ropes tightening in response, never in protest. There is no need to fight the breeze, only to ride within its rhythm, just as the canoe does, just as the crew does. It is in this suspended world of motion and stillness that the boy begins to learn the stars. They rise slowly, never all at once. First, a pale shimmer low on the horizon, then the confident arrival of a bright companion, and finally a spill of faint dust. The Milky Way, soft and sprawling overhead. The sky is no longer a ceiling. It is a map, a living, changing guide. The navigator begins to hum, a low tone that swells and dips like the swell of the ocean itself. The boy listens, sitting near the base of the mast where a small bundle of coiled rope serves as his seat. He watches the navigator's hands. They rise slowly, pointing toward one cluster of stars, then another. Each gesture carries the weight of names not spoken aloud. These stars do not go by Western constellations. They are not Orion or Scorpius. They are Shark Spine, Stingray's Tail, Path of the Ghost Canoe, names passed mouth to ear, generation to generation, never written. The boy tries to match what he sees with what he feels. It is not enough to know that a star is bright. One must know when it rises, when it sinks, what color it flickers, how long it lingers above the eastern wave, what it leans toward. He sees the old navigator close his eyes again. It is strange at first to navigate with eyes shut, but then the boy understands. The stars are not just seen, they are remembered. He tilts his head back, searching for the shark spine. He finds it, a diagonal stretch of white points running low in the northern sky. He traces it in his mind. Then the stingray, a soft arc, barely perceptible, but always there. The navigator does not correct him. He does not need to. The sea and sky will be the teachers tonight. The canoe continues forward, steady and unbothered. Each wave rocks it softly, like a cradle. The sail bellies in the wind and sighs with relief. There is no hurry. They travel not toward a point, but along a path. And the path is not straight. It never is. The boy's eyes grow heavy, but he fights sleep. Not out of fear, but wonder. Each minute reveals a new shimmer above or a new rhythm below. The stars are not still. They move, and they move the canoe, or rather, the canoe moves in relationship to them. It is not the stars that change. It is everything else. A soft voice beside him startles him slightly. It is the woman, the healer. She sits cross-legged now, holding a shallow bowl of water between her palms. She lifts it slowly and holds it at eye level. "Look," she whispers. He leans forward. The bowl is still. Within it, the sky reflects. But something is different. "The water shows you how the stars walk," she says. He watches as the faintest ripple bends the reflection, showing how the sky moves when the sea does. It is not a mirror. It is a conversation. The water speaks to the stars, and the stars whisper back. "You must know both," she says. "Sky above, water below. The line between them is you." The bowl is passed to the navigator. He dips a finger into it, then places it on his tongue. He is tasting for salt, for depth, for memory, and then, softly, he begins to speak. Not a chant, not a lesson, but a memory. He tells of a voyage many years before, when the stars were different or seemed so, when he was the boy, and his own teacher watched him fumble in the dark. The canoe then had been smaller and the sea rougher, but the stars had remained the same, only he had changed. The boy listens, eyes wide, arms wrapped around his knees. He does not ask questions. They would break the stillness. Instead, he lets the words seep in, like mist. They will settle where they need to. Somewhere above, a bird calls once. High, lonely, and far away. A sign, perhaps, or maybe just a reminder that the world does not sleep. Not even at night. The stars continue their slow dance. The boy begins to recognize them as companions. Not decorations, but guides. Each one has a story, and each story has a direction. He no longer sees a flat sky. He sees movement, pattern, intention. The night deepens. The canoe cuts a narrow path through dark water, stars mirrored on either side, above and below. The horizon disappears. All that remains is sky, water, canoe, breath. And within that floating silence, a boy learns, not through instruction, but through presence. The night sails on, vast and dark, its silence disturbed only by the rhythmic splash of paddles and the occasional creak of wood. The canoe moves gently, a quiet seam between the heavens and the deep. The wind, steady now, hums through the sail like a lullaby, tugging them farther into the open sea. And yet, though land lies far behind them, the voyagers are not alone. There are eyes in the water, not ones of menace or fear, but eyes of presence, of knowing. The sea watches, listens, and waits. In the old stories, the ocean is not a thing. It is a being, alive, conscious, hungry at times, generous at others. One does not simply cross it. One must ask permission. And so, before the voyage reaches too far, a gift must be given. As the first light of pre-dawn begins to warm the rim of the horizon, the healer rises from her corner near the stern. Her movements are unhurried, graceful, shaped by practice and reverence. She unwraps a small bundle of cloth and reveals its contents. Dried flowers, cooked taro, curls of fish skin, a pinch of white coral dust. Nothing elaborate, nothing wasted. Only what the sea knows. Only what the sea accepts. The crew does not speak. They simply watch. The woman kneels at the edge of the starboard hull. She lowers her offering into the water, palm down, fingers spread, letting the items fall one by one into the dark. There is no splash, only a quiet settling, like leaves drifting into a pond. She murmurs something too soft to hear. Not a chant, not exactly a prayer, but a rhythm of syllables meant for no human ear. The boy leans forward, curious. He watches as the petals sink, caught briefly by the current, then pulled into the depths, lost to sight. The taro vanishes next, then the rest. Nothing floats for long. The sea gods are not easily pleased, but they are not cruel. They ask for respect, for humility, for memory. And memory is what these voyagers carry. The navigator closes his eyes. He tilts his head slightly, listening not for sound, but for shift, the subtle turn of current, the breath of wind over wave. The offering has been accepted. He can feel it. With quiet reverence, the crew resumes their duties. The sail is checked and tightened. Ropes are passed hand to hand. A gourd of water is uncorked and passed around, each person drinking a mouthful, then wiping the rim. Even this is a ritual, a shared motion that binds them, not only to each other, but to the voyage itself. The boy is given the last sip. He takes it carefully, hands both cradling the vessel. He drinks and tastes the faint tang of ash, the softness of stored rain. When he passes it back, he feels something has changed. The air seems lighter. The canoe rides easier. Later that morning, as the sun rises full and round, the navigator points toward a patch of sky. A cloud, long and thin, like a stretched reed, cuts across the eastern blue. There, he says, that is a sign. A sign of what he does not say, but the crew nods. The sea accepts signs as it accepts gifts without explanation. Some days, a sign means wind. Some days, rain. Some days, nothing at all. The boy learns that not every sign must be understood. Some simply must be noticed. He sits beside the woman again, his hands resting in his lap. She hums, not a chant this time, but a working song, one meant to keep the heart steady during long hours. He finds himself breathing in rhythm with her melody. The canoe rocks, the sail flutters, the sea seems to join in. Later still, fish leap near the hull, small silver flashes that vanish as quickly as they came. The crew smiles. It is another sign, a good one, life traveling beside them. The navigator speaks again, this time to the boy. "Do you know why we feed the sea?" he asks. The boy shakes his head gently. "Because the sea remembers," the navigator says. He says nothing more. But the boy carries those words with him, turning them over in his mind like a polished shell. The sea remembers, not just offerings and prayers, but footsteps on shorelines, tears shed in storms, laughter spilled into the wind. All of it remembered. He glances down at the water. It looks the same as ever, blue, deep, rippling. But now it feels different, more alive, less like a road, more like a listener. As the day unfolds, the canoe continues forward. The sun climbs, then softens. The sky deepens into gold. No land in sight, only clouds shaped like mountains on the horizon. Illusions, echoes of places not yet found. That evening, another offering is prepared. A curl of banana leaf, a pinch of ash, a whisper of song. This time, it is the boy who lowers it into the water. The sea accepts it just the same. Above, the stars begin to emerge once more. And the voyage continues. The ocean has no roads, No carved paths, no painted markers, no stones laid to show the way. And yet, for those who have learned its language, it is a world of signs, soft, shifting, but clear. The stars guide, yes, but there are other ways to know direction. Other maps, not made with ink or parchment, but with shell, fiber, and memory. In the shade of the sail, as the midday heat presses gently on the crew, the navigator reaches beneath a cloth-wrapped bundle and withdraws a small frame. The boy watches, drawn in by the object's quiet presence. It is made of thin, curved sticks, lashed with fiber in a delicate web. Affixed to it at certain crossings are shells, some white and ridged, others dark and smooth. It is a map, not the kind one might expect. There are no landmasses drawn, no labeled ports, no obvious shapes. But to the navigator, it is as legible as the stars. Perhaps more so. This, the navigator says softly, is not the sea. It is the sea's memory. He passes the frame to the boy, who holds it carefully in both hands. It is surprisingly light, fragile in feel but strong in intent. The sticks curve gently, creating arcs and angles that seem chaotic at first. But the more the boy studies it, the more it feels intentional. He runs his fingers along one curved spine. The navigator nods. That curve, he says, is a swell, a long wave that moves always from the same direction. It tells you where the wind was born, many days before. He points to two shells placed close together. These are islands, but not just their shapes, their presence, their effect. The boy furrows his brow, unsure. The navigator smiles. Islands do not only sit in the sea, they change it. They bend the waves like wind bends the grass. The water wraps around them. It shifts, and we feel that shift. The woman, seated nearby, unrolls a palm leaf. On it are faint marks, not writing but shallow cuts and folds. She fans it gently, letting the light catch the angles. Another map, she murmurs, but softer. Palm leaf lore is less exact than the shell map. It holds impressions, the timing of bird migrations, the taste of salt near certain islands, the color of the sky when land is close. Passed down through generations of women, it is a record not of coordinates, but of experience. She offers the palm leaf to the boy. He holds it up and lets it rustle gently in the breeze. The markings make no immediate sense, but something in them feels familiar, like remembering a dream that wasn't quite his. In this way, he begins to understand that navigation is not a single art, but many, a weaving of sky and sea, of shells and songs, of memories whispered across generations. Later, when the sun has lowered and the sky is bruised with violet and gold, the navigator sets the shell map aside. It is not for constant use. Its purpose is not to show the way in the moment, but to remind the mind of paths already learned. It is a song in wood and shell, one that sings even when silent. The canoe rocks gently as the wind softens. The sea stretches smooth, like glass in places. The boy lies back and looks up. The stars are coming again, flickering into view one by one, as they always do. But now he sees them differently. They are not just lights. They are part of something, a network like the web of sticks in the shell map. A sky path, a memory. The navigator begins a chant. It is slow, low, and long. The words are old, their meanings layered. The chant names islands, not as places but as forces, as presences. The rhythm mimics the ocean's breath. It tells of reefs that cut the current, of atolls that hold the wind close like a secret. It tells of birds that follow fish, and fish that follow warmth. The boy closes his eyes and lets the chant carry him. He does not need to understand every word. The meaning is deeper than language. It lives in the body, in the sway of the canoe, in the salt that dries on his skin. Later that night, the healer shows him another palm leaf. This one older, darker with age. It smells of smoke and oil. The marks are deeper, more intricate. This one, she says, was my mother's, and her mother's, and her mother's before that. He runs his hand gently along its edge. It doesn't change, he whispers. The woman nods.
No,
but the way we see it does. And so the maps of shell and palm are not tools but companions. They do not tell the ocean where to go. They help the voyagers listen. As the canoe drifts on and sleep begins to touch the edges of thought, the boy dreams of strings connecting stars to islands, shells to wind, palm leaves to memory. He dreams of charts made of song and sea foam, and above all, he dreams of movement, slow, gentle, certain. The canoe, like a cradle, moves softly over the water's wide breadth. By now, the shoreline has long vanished, replaced by a horizon that circles in every direction. Sky melting into sea, sea breathing into sky. Time no longer holds shape. The voyage unfolds not in hours, but in moments, some strung gently together by sun and stars, others broken softly apart by sleep. It is in the gray hush of early dawn that the rain comes. Not a storm, not a shout from the sky, but a whisper, a hush that begins as a stillness in the wind, the kind of silence that makes sailors glance upward without knowing why. Then, a faint shiver in the air, a scent, thickness. The navigator stirs. He lifts his face to the clouds, then reaches out a hand. One drop, then another. The woman begins to hum. Rain songs in the open ocean are not for keeping time. They are for keeping peace. They are for reminding the sea, and those upon it, that change is not to be feared. Rain may come, winds may turn, but the canoe endures, and the voyage continues. The woman's voice is low, steady, like water tapping hollow wood. It is not in any one language. The words shift, like driftwood turning in current. It is the sound that matters, the rhythm. The boy sits beneath the shelter of a rolled sail, knees pulled close, watching the droplets fall. They strike the surface of the ocean like soft drums, each circle spreading gently outward. The sea, until now a calm mirror, is transformed into a field of ripples. Not wild, not angry, just changed. The navigator unwraps a small bundle of bark cloth and lays it across the top of the center hull. It is meant to catch water. The crew moves in practiced silence, opening containers, tilting gourds, preparing to gather what the sky offers. This is not panic. This is ritual. Rain is not enemy. Rain is gift. The boy is handed a coconut shell bowl and instructed, with a small nod, to hold it still. He watches the water collect slowly within, each drop a glint of sky. He wonders how many stars have dissolved into this rain before it fell. The clouds deepen. The rain grows steady. A warm, even drizzle.
No thunder.
No threat. Just sound. Steady, soothing, all-encompassing. The sea and sky merge into one vast gray breath. The woman's song continues, now joined by the crew. A gentle call and response. It speaks of land remembered, not seen. Of wind and root and sky. Of ancestors who crossed great distances in canoes smaller than this one, following signs no outsider could see. The boy begins to hum along, tentatively at first, then more sure. The melody is not hard to follow. It moves in circles. It returns where it began. As the rain falls, the navigator shifts his weight and checks the balance of the canoe. Rain changes the sea, not in anger, but in texture. Swells grow rounder. Currents blur. He squints toward the east, scanning for birds, clouds, anything out of place. The rain wraps the world in softness. The air is warm, dense with scent. The ocean's surface turns to velvet. The canoe glides with even more gentleness than before, as if cushioned by the sky itself. The boy is handed a wet strip of cloth, which he uses to wipe the deck. Even this small act is part of the voyage. The canoe must be kept clean not just for function but for respect. It is more than vessel. It is companion, and companions are cared for. By midday, the rain softens, then stops. Not suddenly, but like a breath slowly exhaled. The sky brightens in patches. A sliver of light splits the clouds, casting silver across the waves. The surface of the ocean sparkles, each drop of rain now part of the swell. The woman gathers the filled gourds and seals them with care. The crew stretches their arms. No one speaks loudly. The hush of the rain still clings to them, like the dampness on their clothes. The navigator dips a hand into the sea and tastes. Then he nods. The course remains steady. The boy climbs onto the central deck and lies back, arms spread wide. Above him, clouds drift slowly apart, revealing a few bold stars still holding on in the pale sky. He listens for the rain, even though it's gone. He hears it still, in the rhythm of the water against the hull, in the slow beating of his heart. He closes his eyes. For a moment, he feels himself floating outside of time. Rain behind him, stars ahead, water all around. Somewhere in the soft hum of wind and paddle, the navigator begins another chant, this one for what lies ahead. The boy does not know the words, but he knows their shape. He knows they mean movement, and trust, and quiet return. The sea has a way of playing with certainty. It stretches itself into miles of sameness, only to surprise you with what you didn't expect, or what you thought you saw but didn't. There are islands, the navigators say, that live more in memory than in stone. Some rise from the waves for a moment, then vanish into sky. Some appear on the tip of the mind but cannot be touched. Others are never truly there at all. It is just before dawn when the boy sees it. He sits at the bow, eyes wide and full of stars, scanning the dim horizon as he's seen the navigator do. The light is faint, more suggestion than fact, and for a brief moment he thinks he sees land. A low dark shape, rising slightly from the surface. He blinks. It's still there. He blinks again. It's gone. He says nothing at first, only watches, but the image stays with him. The faint curve of beach, the shade of something solid, the imagined sound of birds. Was it real? Later that morning, after the crew has eaten salted fish and torn pieces of dried banana wrapped in leaf, the boy approaches the navigator, voice hushed. I think I saw an island, he says. The navigator does not laugh. He simply looks up at the sky, nods once and says, Perhaps you did. Then why isn't it there now? The boy asks, with no accusation in his voice, only wonder. The navigator stares out at the water. Some islands come when they are needed, he replies, and leave when they are not. He gestures to the sea. There are places out here that carry the memory of land. They look like islands, they feel like islands. Sometimes they even smell like them, but they were never meant to be touched. They are reminders. Reminders of what? The boy asks. Of how easily we forget that seeing is not always knowing, he replies. The boy nods, slowly. He begins to understand. As the sun climbs, clouds begin to form along the horizon. Long, flat-bottomed, thick. They hover above the sea like a row of distant mountains. Many who sail for the first time mistake them for land. The old sailors know better, but the illusion is powerful. Even the crew glances toward the clouds now and then. The longing for land is subtle but constant. A flicker of thought in every movement, the idea of solid ground, of stillness, of trees. The woman begins to tell a story. Her voice is quiet, meant not to interrupt the work of the crew, but to flow with it. There was once a canoe, she says, that followed the path of the stars, just as we do. One morning, the youngest crew member saw an island. He pointed, and the crew turned toward it. They paddled hard. They sang with joy, but as they grew closer, the island grew fainter. Eventually, it vanished altogether. Only open sea remained. What happened then? The boy asks. They kept paddling, she replies, and a week later they found land. Real land. Not the one they chased, but one that welcomed them. Had they stopped looking, they might never have found it. The boy sits with the words. They move through him like current. Later in the day, a school of flying fish leap beside the canoe. Dozens of silver flashes skipping across the water's skin. The crew watches in silence, smiles breaking like small waves across their faces. Even the navigator chuckles softly. The sea is not empty, not ever. And then a shadow. Far off, in the late afternoon haze, something rises again on the horizon. The boy's breath catches. Could it be land this time? The navigator rises slowly and shields his eyes. He watches, then nods once. Not land, he says. Cloud, heavy with water, but shaped like memory. The crew says nothing more. No one turns the canoe. There is comfort in this, the knowing and not knowing, the chasing and the stillness. The sea is not a place of answers. It is a place of learning. That night, after the stars return and the chants begin, the boy finds himself humming a tune of his own. It has no words, but it carries a shape of longing, of finding, of letting go. He dreams again of islands, some with beaches, some with voices, some with nothing at all. And in the dream, the canoe never stops moving, because even the island that isn't there can still show the way. There are moments on the ocean when the world becomes impossibly quiet, not from stillness, but from balance. The wind breathes softly, the sail sighs, and the canoe rocks with a hush so complete it feels like the earth itself has paused to listen. It is in this kind of silence that the waves begin to speak. Not in words, never in words, but in rhythm, in shape, in pulse. The navigator sits at the center of the canoe, legs crossed, eyes half closed. He is not asleep, yet he is not entirely awake in the usual sense. His hand rests on the wood of the hull, fingers lightly tapping in response to the roll of the sea. He is listening. The boy watches him, mimicking the motion, placing his own small palm on the warm deck. At first, he feels nothing unusual, just the familiar lift and dip, the cradle-like motion of their slow drift forward. But then, with time, always with time, the boy begins to feel a difference. There is a rhythm beneath the rhythm. The ocean does not move in randomness. The swells carry messages. Some are long, deep rolls that speak of wind from many days ago. Others are short, choppy murmurs that hint at reefs or islands just out of sight. The canoe feels each one, and so does the navigator. He begins to chant, almost absent-mindedly. The chant follows no fixed melody, but rises and falls with the movement of the water. It is a song not of direction, but of understanding, a way to stay in conversation with the sea. The woman joins him, her voice softer, weaving harmony through his tone like thread through cloth. They do not look at each other. They do not need to. Their voices belong to the ocean now. The boy shifts closer to the side of the hull, dipping his fingers into the sea. The water is cool, silk smooth against his skin. He closes his eyes and lets the movement guide him. He begins to feel what the navigator meant when he said the waves talk. Some speak of wind, others of presence, others of absence. One wave rolls beneath the canoe with a strange stillness, like a held breath. The boy looks up, startled, as if someone called his name. But no one has. The woman, sensing his change in posture, leans toward him. Sometimes, she says, the sea remembers something and says it aloud. He doesn't understand, not fully, but he nods. That night, the waves grow larger. Not dangerous, but deep, rolling, thoughtful. The sky above is clear, the stars arranged like quiet witnesses. The canoe cuts through the dark water with barely a sound, but the hull shudders now and then, as if in conversation. The navigator murmurs again, this time pointing behind them. That swell, he says, came from a storm we never saw, passed far to the south days ago. But the sea carries its voice. The boy imagines this. A storm, wild and roaring, shouting its fury into the ocean, and the ocean carrying that voice across hundreds of miles to reach them here, now in this quiet. It makes him shiver, though the night air is warm. He realizes that every ripple has history, every motion a memory. Later, as the moon climbs high and pale above them, the crew lies in scattered places along the canoe, some asleep, some simply breathing with the waves. The boy lies near the healer, who holds a small woven charm between her fingers. It is shaped like a spiral, knotted from reeds and drift hair. For listening, she says softly, holding it to his ear. He places it beside his head, and though it is silent, he feels something like a slow echo. The sea speaks not only through motion, but through stillness. A paradox the boy begins to accept. Before he falls asleep, He sits up one last time and places his hand once again on the wood of the hull. He listens, not for words, but for knowing, and in the low hush of night, he feels the waves talk back. Not to him, but with him. And it is enough. The sea is vast, yes, but within it live quiet routines, soft rituals, and old knowledge passed from hand to hand like a sacred shell. Among these, the act of fishing is not merely for sustenance. It is a conversation, a practice, a form of remembering. The fish are not hunted. They are invited. As the sun lifts its golden eye over the horizon, the canoe rocks with a familiar anticipation. The navigator, always alert to the rhythms of wind and wave, nods to the crew. Today, the sea feels generous. From beneath a bench wrapped in woven mats, the boy retrieves a narrow bundle wrapped in banana leaf and tied with dried vine. He brings it to the navigator, who accepts it with gentle hands. Slowly, ceremoniously, the navigator unties the wrap. Inside are hooks, not the sharp metal ones you may picture, but hooks carved from bone, shell, and coral. Each one is slightly different. Some curve like crescent moons, others are barbed subtly with tiny notches. Some are dull with use, others pale with age. And each one has a story. These belong to my grandfather, the navigator says, selecting one with a dark groove along the shaft. He carved this from the rib of a whale, used it to catch fish longer than our canoe. He passes it to the boy, who turns it over carefully in his hands. It is smooth and warm from the navigator's palm. He can feel the age in it, not in weakness, but in weight, the kind of weight that carries memory. With quiet steps, the crew prepares the lines, cords braided from coconut husk fiber, long and strong. They do not toss the lines carelessly. They do not bait them with blood or flash. Instead, they wrap small pieces of shell and polished pearl into the knots, letting them catch the light. Fish don't chase, the woman says from her place near the stern. They notice, they respond, they decide. The canoe slows, sail drawn in. The water here is calm, almost glass. Beneath the surface, dark shapes shift lazily. The boy peers over the side and sees movement. Flashes of silver, glimmers of striped tail fins, the lazy loop of something long and blue. He drops the line slowly, holding his breath. The shell hook vanishes below. He watches the line drift and tremble, not from motion but from possibility. Minutes pass, then more. Nothing happens, but no one is impatient. Fishing, like sailing, is about waiting. The sea chooses the moment, then a small pull, gentle, curious. The boy's hands tighten slightly. He does not jerk. He does not reel. He holds, listens, and lets the fish decide. Another pull, firmer this time. A slight tug forward, then a pause, then release. He looks up at the navigator, unsure. The navigator shakes his head softly. Not yet. That one is testing you. So the boy waits, and finally a strong, clear pull. The line tightens. The hook has found its mark. With careful hands, the boy begins to lift the line, pulling steadily, evenly. No rush. The sea does not reward haste. As the fish nears the surface, it flashes, golden, wide-finned, moving with surprising grace even in capture. The navigator reaches with a small net carved from coconut spine and lifts the fish aboard. It flops once, twice, then rests. It is not large, but it is beautiful. The woman places a hand on the fish's head and murmurs a quiet word. Thank you, perhaps, or a farewell. They wrap the fish in leaf and place it in a hollow section of the hull, out of the sun. No part of it will be wasted. Throughout the day, others fish. Some lines come up empty. Others catch smaller fish, flickering and slippery. One line pulls hard, then breaks, the fish gone with hook and memory. Each catch is met with quiet reverence. There is no cheering. No boasting. Only gratitude, and sometimes a soft chant of thanks. The boy is allowed one more turn. He selects another of the grandfather's hooks, a smaller one, curved like a question. He ties it carefully, mindful of tension. The line is dropped, and again he waits. This time, nothing comes. The line sways. The water remains still. But he is not disappointed. The ocean gives when it chooses. He pulls the line back, winds it with care, and returns the hook to its leaf-wrapped bundle. Before sealing it, he pauses, holds it in his hand a moment longer. The navigator smiles at him. You listened well. That night, they cook the day's catch on flat stones warmed by the sun and seawater. The smell drifts gently through the canoe. Savory, smoky, soft. Everyone eats in near silence. Even the boy, hungry and proud, takes slow bites, chewing with care. And when the meal is done, the bones are gathered and returned to the sea. Not discarded, returned. Because nothing here is forgotten. Not even the fish. Night returns like a familiar tide, soft, slow, inevitable. The sun sinks beyond the curve of the sea, drawing with it the long shadows of the crew, leaving only the hush of stars and the hush of breath. The sea grows dark again, not menacing, but endless. A velvet sky mirrored beneath the canoe. The meal has passed. The fishing lines are coiled. The hull has been wiped clean with saltwater-soaked cloth. The crew settles into rest. Not sleep yet, but that quiet space just before, when the body softens and the mind opens. It is in this space that the woman prepares her tools. She sits cross-legged beside the central beam, opening a narrow bundle made from layers of bark cloth and twine. Inside are needles, some carved from sharpened bone, others from stingray spines. Beside them, a pot of dark ink rests in a hollowed nut, its surface catching the starlight. The ink is made from charred coconut, soot gathered from old voyages, and the resin of trees that grew near the sea. She is not only a healer, she is also a tattooist, not for decoration, not for vanity, but for memory. She has tattooed maps, chants, lineages, wind directions, migration stories, all written in the language of line and dot, curve and repetition. On skin, these stories travel farther than paper ever could. The boy watches as she unwraps a second cloth. This one contains a long flat comb, its teeth sharp and close-set. She dips it into the ink and prepares the tapping stick, a length of heavy wood used to strike the comb, embedding ink just beneath the skin. The navigator removes his tunic and turns his back toward her without a word. This night, she will add a mark for this voyage, not because it is over, but because it is unfolding. She begins with a simple motion. Dip, press, tap. The sound is soft, rhythmic, not harsh like hammering, but insistent, like distant rain on woven thatch. The navigator does not flinch. He has worn many stories. The boy leans forward, eyes following the pattern. The woman taps a single straight line just below the shoulder. Then, a swirl beside it. The swirl represents wind, the line movement. Together, they say, voyage carried with harmony. She works slowly, respectfully. Between each sequence, she wipes the skin with a cloth dipped in cool water. Her voice hums beneath her breath. Not a chant, but a grounding sound. A sound that keeps the story steady. When she finishes, the navigator exhales once and nods. She seals the ink with oil, mixed with powdered coral and flower sap. The boy asks, quietly, "Will I be tattooed someday?" The woman smiles. "Only when you've begun to carry the ocean's memory." What does that mean? She does not answer. Not directly. Instead, she turns her own forearm toward him, where a series of dots form a winding path from wrist to elbow. "This," she says, "is my journey to the first island I ever reached without asking where I was." The boy runs his finger lightly along the path. Curves in a way he didn't expect. Not straight, not tidy. It reminds him of the way waves move, the way the canoe drifts slightly before correcting, the way stars arc across the sky not in lines, but in long, patient circles. Later, another crew member steps forward. He has a space on his upper arm he's saved for something that hasn't happened yet. The woman marks it with 3 parallel lines and a small ring beside them. "For the rain that gave us water," she says. "And the ring is for the fish who answered." He smiles and bows his head. These tattoos are not shown off. They are worn inwardly, even when placed on the skin. They do not seek admiration. They hold memory. They hold proof. The boy looks at his own arms. Smooth, unmarked. For now, he wonders what story his skin will carry someday. Will it be a chant? A swell? A bird that flew in the wrong direction? A mistake turned into a lesson? He thinks of the fish he caught, of the hook he returned, of the island that wasn't there. He thinks of the waves that talked back, and he begins to understand. The sea marks those who sail it, not always with ink, sometimes with silence, sometimes with the way your voice changes when you talk about distance, sometimes with dreams. That night, under a sky thick with stars, the woman wraps her tools again, oils the combs, seals the ink, and sets the bundle near her resting mat. She hums one last note. The canoe rocks gently. The sea listens, and the ocean's memory is written, line by line, wave by wave, under skin and sky alike. The sea does not announce its changes with alarm. There are no sirens here, no flashing lights, only shifts, tiny, deliberate, a current that curls differently, a silence that lasts just a little too long, a seabird that circles but does not land. It is morning when the change begins. The sun rises, but its warmth feels filtered, thin, uncertain. The light seems duller, though there are no clouds at first. The waves, once easy and rhythmic, now pause between breaths. The wind, always steady until now, begins to flutter in stutters, like a flag trying to remember its motion. The navigator notices first. He crouches low, one hand skimming the surface of the sea, the other placed on the deck. His head tilts, and his gaze moves not to the sky, but to the water just beside the hull, watching, listening. The sea is thinking, he murmurs. That's all he says. The woman, too, begins her quiet preparations. Not out of fear, there is no panic in her, but from respect. She ties her bundle tighter. She wraps her tools. She prepares a small cloth soaked in coconut oil and places it near her mat. She will not need it now, but she might. The boy notices the silence. Not that people aren't talking, they rarely speak much anyway, but the silence of the sea itself. The birds have stopped calling. The wind has stopped singing through the ropes. Even the canoe creaks differently. What is it? He asks the woman. A lull, she says, before the sea decides what it wants. He nods, unsure. The sky slowly dims, though the sun is still high. Clouds form low, distant, heavy with thought. Not black and angry, not yet, but gray, slow-moving, thick. A blanket pulled tighter across the sky. The sails are loosened, then furled. The paddles are readied, not for distance now, but for control. Every motion becomes intentional. No one rushes. Rushing insults the sea. The boy helps tie down the bundles, securing the food, the gourds, the wrapped fishhooks. He double-checks the knots, his hands not trembling but alert. The crew sits close to the hull now, leaning in, weight-centered. They do not look afraid. They look focused, rooted. The storm, if it comes, will come on its own time. And so they wait. The wind comes first. Not as a scream, but a warning. A long, low breath that rolls over the waves and ruffles the edges of the sailcloth. Tugs at hair, at lashes, at thought. Then the clouds deepen. The sky grows leaden, and the color of the sea shifts. No longer bright, it turns a shade of pewter, a kind of muted steel that reflects nothing. The horizon disappears. There is only above and below and the thin line between them, the canoe. The woman offers the boy a woven mat to wrap around his shoulders. Not just for warmth, but for grounding. He takes it and sits beside her, eyes wide but steady. The navigator stands at the bow, one hand on the mast, his gaze fixed not ahead, but slightly to the side, watching how the waves move in the corner of his vision. They are deciding, he says quietly. The canoe rocks, gently still. The storm has not arrived. Not fully, but the air carries its weight. This is the quiet before, the moment that holds its breath. The boy begins to understand something, that not all storms arrive in fury. Some announce themselves in stillness, the kind that makes you feel the blood in your fingertips, the hush in your chest. And still, the canoe waits. It is not fragile. It was made for this. Its hull was carved from trees that bent in mountain winds. Its lashings are made from fibers that withstood tides and salt and age. Its spirit has known waves far taller than this sky. It was built not only to move but to endure. The boy presses his palm to the hull and feels no fear, only readiness. The canoe is not anxious. It does not wonder what the storm will do. It simply responds. Rain begins to fall, light at first, then more. Not the soft whisper of drizzle this time, but steady, rhythmic. Not cold, not violent, just present. The sails are fully down now. The paddles steady, the canoes drift. The crew hunches low, bodies angled to the swell. The sea rises, not fast, but with certainty. Waves lift the canoe, not to toss it, but to test it, lifting, lowering, then lifting again. The boy grips the side and breathes in time with the motion. The woman hums once, then stops. The chant is not needed now. Only stillness. The storm is not a beast to be fought. It is a song to be heard. The crew does not speak. They ride the rhythm. Eyes half closed, bodies still, breath slow. And in that slow rocking, with rain pattering on skin and wood, the canoe drifts onward. Not into chaos, but into understanding. The quiet has not gone. It has only changed. It is no longer the quiet of waiting. It is the quiet of knowing. When the rain passed, it left behind a stillness that was not empty. The waves, though heavier than before, returned to their steady rhythm. The air, though thick with salt and clouded light, felt clear. And the canoe, though damp from storm and effort, felt no less alive. In fact, it felt more certain, as if the sea had tested its memory and found it strong. The crew did not speak of the storm. There was no need. It had come and they had listened. That was enough. By midday, the clouds thinned. The sun peered cautiously through breaks in the gray. The sea now shimmered with a dull sheen, like stone polished by breath. The crew began their quiet routines again, checking the ropes, shifting weight across the hull, and tightening bundles that had loosened during the night. The boy sat near the center beam, watching the healer as she unfolded a dried pandanus mat and placed 3 coconuts upon it. Their shells were weathered, dark, still cool from the shaded storage beneath the deck. Water was rationed carefully now. Rain had filled the gourds, a blessing, but it was not a guarantee. And though the sea surrounded them in every direction, its water was not for drinking. It was a mirror, not a well. The woman tapped each coconut softly with the back of her knife. Once, twice, then listened. She passed one to the boy and motioned for him to hold it to his ear. "What do you hear?" she asked, not unkindly. He listened, sloshing, faint splash. "It's full," he said. She nodded. "And hollow." He blinked, unsure. "The water is there," she continued, "but so is space. Without both, the coconut cannot speak." She offered him the knife, dull on one side, sharpened with coral sand on the other. He held it carefully, balanced it on the coconut's top ridge, and struck gently with the heel of his hand. A crack opened, thin at first, then spreading into a crescent. The scent, sweet, woody, faintly musky, rose from the opening. He tipped it slightly and watched the liquid gather at the lip. The navigator cupped a small bowl and took a single mouthful, then passed it on. Each crew member drank only enough to wet the throat, to moisten the breath. The coconut was passed like a question. Each sip was an answer. When it reached the boy again, there was still a little left. He tilted it and drank, careful not to waste a drop. Afterward, the shell was split and the white flesh carved out with a small wedge of bone. They chewed it slowly, the sweetness dulling the salt on their tongues. The woman handed the boy a piece of husk and pointed to the open shell. "Tell me a riddle," she said. He furrowed his brow. "A riddle," she smiled. "Coconuts keep riddles. We must answer them." He looked down, thinking. "What falls?" he asked slowly. "But never rises unless it's drunk?" The woman chuckled. "That is a good one. And you?" he asked. She traced a circle on the mat. "What wears a face, holds nothing, and vanishes with the tide. He frowned, puzzled. The moon? He guessed. Close, she said. But no, the answer is a reflection. He nodded, slowly, letting the thought settle. Coconut riddles were not just games. They were teachings disguised as play, a way to remember what mattered, without scolding or command. The woman began to carve patterns into the empty shell. Not deep, just surface etchings. Circles, lines, a swirl that might mean wind, a dot that might be a star. What does it mean? The boy asked. It means we were here, she replied, and we remembered to share. The etched shell was set aside, left to dry. Later, it would be dropped into the sea, not as waste but as message. A gift, a whisper to the next traveler. As the sun rose higher, another coconut was opened. This one offered to the sky, poured in small drops over the edge of the hull. Thanks to the rain, the navigator said simply. The sea took the offering without reply. Later, the boy helped wrap the remaining coconuts in leaf and cord, storing them beneath the platform once more. The husks were dried and saved. They could be used for fire or rope or kindling for a chant yet to come. Nothing was wasted. Even the silence between riddles was part of the story. The crew dozed in turns. The boy leaned back against a woven pack and closed his eyes, the sound of the water folding and unfolding against the hull like a breathing cloth. The air smelled of salt, wood, and the sweet trace of coconut. He dreamed not of land, nor home, nor stars. He dreamed of a voice asking riddles in the voice of the sea. The ocean teaches in signs, not sentences. It does not explain itself. It gestures subtly, deliberately, through wave, through wind, through the sudden appearance of a single bird in an otherwise empty sky. It was late afternoon when the crew first saw it. At first, just a shadow against the clouds. Then a movement, fast, then slow, circling high above the canoe. A lone seabird, pale-backed, broad-winged, uncertain. The boy noticed it first. His eyes followed its arc, squinting into the sun. There, he whispered, pointing. The crew turned their gaze upward. The navigator watched in silence. The bird spiraled once, then flew in a wide sweep eastward. Then, unexpectedly, it turned not sharply, but with intention, and began flying west. The navigator nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then he moved toward the sail and adjusted the ropes. We follow. The boy hesitated. It changed direction. The navigator nodded again. So must we. It was not a command, but a certainty. In this world, birds are more than creatures. They are messengers, scouts, guides, especially birds that never land on water, birds that nest only on land, that sleep in trees that cannot rest on waves. Their presence means land is near, maybe one day away, maybe less. But what mattered was not just the bird, but its change in direction. It had been flying east. It had decided otherwise. And so the canoe turned west. The sail adjusted. The paddles dipped. The crew shifted their weight. No one asked why. They had seen the bird. As the light softened into evening, more birds appeared. 2, then 3, gliding just above the surface of the water, wings barely brushing the swell. One dove sharply into the sea and rose again, a flicker of silver in its beak. The crew watched with quiet reverence. These birds knew where to find food, and where to find rest. Do they know where we're going? The boy asked. The woman replied, They know where they are going, and we are going with them. She offered him a piece of dried root to chew, bitter at first, then sweet, a plant that helps steady the stomach. It had been used for generations, not as medicine, but as rhythm. The boy chewed slowly, watching the sky. The birds circled again. One passed close enough for him to see the shimmer on its wings. Not white, as he first thought, but iridescent. Hints of green, hints of blue, revealed only in motion. The navigator sang a brief, low chant, a bird call mimic, not to beckon the creature, but to greet it. The bird tilted in flight, as if hearing, then continued westward. By sunset, the clouds had thinned into long ribbons of orange and gold. The sky opened wide, and the birds flew ahead in slow formation. Now 6, now 7, their wings silent against the painted air. The navigator instructed the crew to change course slightly, just a handspan to the right of the previous heading. The crew obeyed. The woman drew a small mark on a strip of bark with charcoal, a curl and a notch, a note in the voyage marking the shift, a memory encoded. The boy sat at the bow, watching the birds until darkness claimed the sky. Even then, he could feel them, their shape, their presence ahead. The stars returned, cold and bright, unmoved by the change in direction. But the sea felt different now, more awake, more expectant. The canoe moved steadily. Each paddle stroke matched the heartbeat of the horizon. Later, the boy asked, "What if the bird was lost?" The navigator smiled. "Then we will have shared its path," he said. "And that is not a loss." The woman added, "Sometimes the bird is not the message. The turning is." The boy nodded. He did not understand it fully, but he understood enough to keep watching. And that night, in his sleep, he dreamed of flying, not above the sea, but just close enough to see the path the canoe left behind. A trail of ripples stretching endlessly east, and then gently bending west. At sea, distance does not announce itself with precision. There are no signs that read land 2 days ahead. Instead, there are shadows, slow to form, slower still to trust. Some fade as the sun climbs. Others wait until dusk to reveal their truth. That morning, the boy awoke before most of the crew. The sky was still painted in that soft, uncertain gray that comes just before dawn, when stars are fading but the sun has not yet claimed the horizon. He rubbed his eyes, stretched slowly, and moved to the bow where the sea opened wide and silent. And there, just at the edge of sight, something different. A darkness that was not cloud. A shape that held its place. He blinked, leaned forward, blinked again. It was nothing, and then it was something. He did not speak immediately. He simply watched. The canoe drifted on, its sails still furled in the light morning breeze. The crew stirred slowly, no rush, no sound louder than the rubbing of rope or the shifting of weight on the hull. Then the navigator emerged, bare feet quiet on the planks, and came to stand beside the boy. Without speaking, he followed the boy's gaze. Together, they looked at the horizon. The navigator tilted his head, squinted slightly, and whispered, "Shadows." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and added, "Now we listen." Listening meant more than silence. It meant sensing. The crew fell into gentle rhythm, some checking the sail, some dipping hands into the sea, some watching birds overhead. No one looked hurried, but all were alert. The woman, seated on her mat, began sorting her herbs again, not for need, but for grounding. She hummed quietly, her voice a thin thread tying morning to meaning. As the sun rose higher, the shadow remained. Not larger, not clearer, but more certain. The boy asked, "Is it land?" The navigator answered, "Not yet, but it could become." He explained softly, "Sometimes, land reveals itself in layers. First the scent, a change in the wind, then the birds, then the current. The shape is the last to trust." And so they waited. By midday, the breeze shifted, not sharply, but just enough. It carried something earthy now, something warmer than salt and wind alone. A scent the boy could not name, but recognized instinctively. Leaves, perhaps. Bark. Fire. Life. The crew looked to one another. Still no words, just nods. Then the birds returned, not gliding aimlessly, but flying in loops. One dove into the water and emerged with a leaf in its beak. The leaf fell, trailing behind like a forgotten memory. The canoe drifted past it. The boy leaned over the edge and saw it float, still green. Not driftwood, not debris, green. From land. The navigator adjusted the sail, just slightly, enough to catch the new wind. "We are close now," he said, more to the canoe than to the crew. The boy's heart quickened, not in fear, not in haste, just in awareness. They were moving toward something real. As afternoon softened into golden haze, The shadow on the horizon took shape. Faint ridges, perhaps. A slope, maybe a tree line. The boy could feel it, not in sight alone, but in the sea's behavior. The water thickened, slowed. The swell changed direction subtly. The canoe responded. It always did. Later, as the sky began to bloom with the warm hues of evening, the shadow became less shadow and more presence. Not detailed, still soft, but present. The crew lowered the sail. The navigator stood silent. The woman closed her bundle. The boy stared ahead, eyes wide, breath slow. Land, or something close. The canoe glided forward, carried now more by tide than by effort. The sea was leading them in, not resisting. Still, they did not cheer. They did not shout. Landfall, if it came, would be greeted not with triumph, but with listening. They had learned to trust the sea's silence more than the sky's promise. And now, as twilight deepened and the stars began to whisper above them once more, the shadow on the horizon held, no longer uncertain, no longer imagined, a shape becoming a place. And so, with the stars behind them and the unknown before, the canoe drifted on, slow, sure, quiet, toward the shadow, toward the next story. Arrival does not always come with a loud voice or a loud wave. Sometimes it happens like this, gradually, gently, the world changing around you so slowly that you almost don't notice until it has already changed. The shadow on the horizon had grown darker through the night, not with menace, but with substance. It was no longer a question. It was land. Still distant, still faint, but land. The canoe responded before the crew did. Its motion slightly heavier, its glide a little slower, as if it too felt the pull of gravity, the quiet welcome of earth beneath water. The sea, for all its mystery, does not resent the land. It simply prepares you to meet it properly. And so begins the ceremony of salt and silence. It is not written down, nor taught in long speeches. It is passed in gestures, in practice, in knowing when to stop speaking and when to let the ocean finish her last sentence. The navigator, rising before the others, stands at the bow with both hands open to the wind. His eyes are not fixed on the shore but on the space between, the water that connects here to there, now to soon. The woman prepares a small offering, wrapped in soft bark cloth. Salt harvested from the coast they left, dried leaves from a tree sacred to their home island, and a small strip of old sailcloth, worn smooth by weather and voyage. This is not a sacrifice. It is a conversation, a way of saying, we remember where we came from, even as we greet where we are going. No one speaks. The wind carries the hush of anticipation, not the hush of fear. The boy helps unwrap the sail, catching it with both hands as the navigator loosens the lines. It unfurls slowly, billowing once, then holding firm. The canoe shifts not sharply but decisively. The current welcomes the turn. As they approach, the land reveals more of itself. Gentle ridges, tree silhouettes, faint smoke rising in the sky's golden breath. Not the signs of danger, the signs of presence. Life, perhaps, or memory. The woman walks barefoot to the edge of the canoe and dips her fingers into a small gourd of salt water saved from their first day at sea. With those fingers, she draws 3 lines on the canoe's deck. One forward, one backward, one spiraling in the center. The boy watches. It means we came from water, she says softly. We return to it, and we carry it within us. She then takes the offering bundle and lowers it into the sea. It floats for a moment, bobbing gently, then slowly begins to sink, drawn into the folds of the current like a thought returning home. No one says farewell. The sea doesn't need goodbyes. The navigator leads a final chant. Just one phrase, repeated again and again, each time more softly than the last. The words speak of passage, of completion, but without end. The chant does not close the journey. It opens what comes next. The boy joins in, his voice quiet and sure. He feels the salt on his lips. He feels the silence in his chest. Not the silence of emptiness, but of fullness that no longer needs sound. They paddle now, slowly, not to push but to guide. The current carries them close to shore. The water lightens, grows warmer, shallower. Beneath the hull, they begin to see the shape of sand, the ripple of seabed, the flicker of fish darting between shafts of light. As the shore draws near, the canoe slows. No one stands. No one calls out. Instead, the crew bows their heads. The land is not to be taken. It is to be asked. It is to be met. The woman sprinkles a few grains of salt into the sea beside the hull. The navigator closes his eyes. The boy places a hand on the warm, damp wood of the canoe, breathing with its breath. They drift the final distance, until, at last, the canoe brushes against the earth. Not a crash, not a landing, a meeting, and the ceremony of salt and silence comes to its quiet end. But the voyage does not, because the sea never truly ends. It only pauses. It only shifts. And so they sit for a moment longer, letting the ocean say goodbye in its own slow language, the ripple of wave, the pull of tide, the hush between thoughts. Then the boy steps out into the shallows. His feet meet the sand. The sea releases him, and the land at last holds him. Even on land, the sea lingers, in the taste of air, in the hush between bird calls, in the rhythm of breath. After the canoe's hull settled in the shallow water, no one rushed to unload it. There were no shouts of celebration, no scrambling feet. The crew remained quiet, letting their bodies adjust to stillness, letting their hearts catch up with the journey. The navigator stood barefoot in the water, his eyes on the horizon rather than the shore. His hands remained at his sides, loose, unhurried. The woman gathered her bundles with care, tying each with fresh fiber, brushing away droplets of salt as if brushing away a dream. The boy stayed on the canoe's deck, his legs curled beneath him, his eyes half closed. Though the canoe no longer rocked, he still felt the motion, a memory in his muscles, a lull in his breath. And then they rested, not in beds, not beneath roofs. They rested where they were, on the canoe, beside it, just beyond it on the sand, under trees that bent toward the sea as if listening. The boy lay on a mat woven from pandanus, its fibers cool against his back. The trees overhead rustled gently, mimicking the sound of sails shifting in wind. Somewhere nearby, the soft crackle of a small fire. Someone boiled water in a carved shell, the scent of root and leaf rising into the dusk. But mostly, there was quiet, not silence. Quiet, the kind that holds you without weight. The kind that comes after long movement, when the body begins to let go, but the spirit is still drifting. The boy closed his eyes, and though he lay on land, he did not feel land. He felt the ocean. He felt the swell beneath him, not in waves that lifted him, but in memory. Each breath, in, out, matched the gentle rise and fall of the canoe, even though the canoe was now still. Each breath brought back a moment. The fishhook passed from hand to hand. The coconut shared in silence. The storm that did not shout, but waited. The bird that turned, and so they turned too. The chant that faded into sleep. All of it drifted through him like slow tide. The boy did not try to sleep. He let himself be drifted toward it, the way a canoe lets the current decide the path for a while. His fingers twitched as if still holding the paddle. His foot shifted as if still balancing on wood. He breathed in, and the air tasted like stars. He breathed out, and the sky exhaled with him. The woman, too, lay nearby, her head resting on a rolled cloth, her hands folded over her chest. She whispered something once. A chant, a dream, a farewell, and then was still. The navigator sat upright, eyes open, but unseeing. His mind not lost, but far away, listening to waves he would not see again for many days. His back was straight, but his spirit was swaying. And above them, the sky slowly turned, stars emerging one by one like remembered names. The sea was no longer beneath them, but it was within them, inside the skin, inside the rhythm of their bones. And as the boy drifted deeper into sleep, his breath slowed, softened, matched once more the swell of the voyage that had brought him here. In his dream, the canoe rocked again. Not forward, not backward, not toward, not away, but gently, endlessly, as it always had, as it always will. The dreams of sailors are not like the dreams of those who sleep on steady ground. They move differently. They shift, sway, roll. They remember the sea even when the sea is far away. That night, as the boy slept on the soft mat near the canoe, he dreamed of fire. Not the fire of destruction, but of presence. A fire lit not to burn, but to be seen. It flickered on a distant shoreline, far across an ocean still warm from the day's sun. A single flame, then another, then a ring of fires dancing along the edge of land barely visible in the dark. He did not know the place, but he felt it had been waiting for him, and when he woke, the sky was still deep with night. The stars still shone, and the breeze still moved gently through the leaves above. The fire from his dream was gone, but the feeling remained. He rose quietly, walked to the edge of the beach, and looked out. There was no fire, only the sea, endless and dark, broken only by the shimmer of moonlight on the swell. He sat down and placed his hands in the sand, letting the grains shift beneath his fingers. The navigator joined him not long after, silent, his steps soft. He did not ask why the boy was awake. They both simply looked out. Then the navigator spoke, not loud, but clear. "Sometimes," he said, "the sea shows you what has already happened far away." The boy glanced at him. "The fire," he said. "It felt real." "It was," the navigator replied. "But I haven't been there," the boy said. The navigator looked at the sky. "Not with your feet, but maybe with your breath, with your dreaming." The boy did not answer. Behind them, the canoe rested on the shore. Its twin hulls sunk gently into the sand as if it too were sleeping. The sails rolled tight, barely stirred. The woman turned in her sleep but did not wake. The fire from the boy's dream lingered in his mind. Steady, circular, distant. He could still see how it had flared and folded, how it had seemed both welcoming and watching. The navigator drew a circle in the sand between them. "There is always another island," he said, "and always another fire. Sometimes they are ahead, sometimes behind, but they are always part of the story." He pointed at the horizon. "The fire you saw, it may be there now, or it may have burned long ago." The boy frowned. "Then why did I see it?" The navigator smiled. "Because the sea wanted you to remember something. Not everything has to be understood." They sat in silence for a long while, and then, just before dawn, a faint red flicker appeared far out on the water's edge. The boy blinked. Was it real? Pulsed once, then again, then faded. He looked at the navigator, but the navigator had already closed his eyes. "You saw it," the boy whispered. The navigator nodded. "I see many fires," he said. "Not all of them are burning now." As the sun began to warm the edge of the world, the crew stirred. The woman rose and laid her palm on the canoe's hull, feeling the dew. The boy stood, brushing sand from his arms. He looked once more toward the horizon. The fire, if it had been there at all, was gone. But the feeling remained, and that was enough. By midday, the crew would prepare to move again. Not far, just around the curve of the island to explore, to restock, to see. But the voyage was not over. Not really, because the ocean remembers the fires, and the fire remembers the journey. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, they show themselves to those who have learned how to see. The next day arrived slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the hush that had settled over the shore. Morning sunlight filtered through palm fronds and played along the hull of the canoe, now resting dry and quiet, like a sleeping animal that might stir at any moment. The sea, still nearby, seemed to pause too, not retreating, not rushing, just breathing in place. There was no need to move quickly. This was a day for small things. The boy wandered along the edge of the beach, his toes curling into the damp sand. His eyes scanned the line where tide met land, the place where forgotten objects sometimes came to rest. Tangled roots, fallen fruit, long ropes of seaweed, and sometimes, if the ocean was in a generous mood, something usable. It was the navigator who spotted the wood, half buried beneath a mound of dried kelp and scattered shells. It was long and worn smooth, dark from water and sun. Driftwood, not from this island, not from any island nearby, but from somewhere far across the sea. Its edges were rounded, its shape vaguely curved, as if it remembered being part of something once. A boat, a hut, perhaps even another paddle. The navigator lifted it slowly, turning it over in his hands. He pressed one end against the sand, leaned on it, and nodded. It held firm. "This could serve," he said. The boy watched as the navigator brought it back to the shade of the canoe and set it on a mat. He knelt beside it, rolled up his sleeves, and unwrapped a small bundle of tools. Flakes of obsidian, sharp-edged shells, coral files. No iron, no steel, only what the islands and sea provided. The boy sat beside him. "Will you teach me?" The navigator smiled but said nothing. He simply held out a blade of polished bone and placed it gently in the boy's hands. "Begin," he said. The boy held the driftwood steady and studied its grain. It was dense, waterlogged in parts, but dry enough to shape. He placed the blade against the edge and began to scrape. Gently at first, then with more confidence. The sound was soft, steady, like a whisper against bark. The navigator sat nearby, not correcting, only watching. "You don't force the shape," he said after a while. "You uncover it." The boy looked confused. The navigator ran his palm over the wood. "This has been part of many things already. Listen to what it remembers. Carve with that." So the boy listened, with his hands, with his eyes, with the quiet between each motion. As he carved, the blade loosened thin curls of wood, which fell like shavings of memory into the sand. The driftwood began to change, not into something new, but into something it had always been meant to be. A paddle. Slowly, hour by hour, the shape revealed itself. A flat, rounded end. A handle that fit the hand without strain. Not perfect, not symmetrical, but true. The woman brought them water and fruit, then sat nearby and began to sing. Not a chant, but a working song, one that helped steady the rhythm of the hand. By late afternoon, the paddle was complete. The boy held it, tested its weight. He ran his fingers along its edge and smiled. "It's not as smooth as the others," he said. "It doesn't need to be," the navigator replied. "It will learn." They oiled it with coconut and wrapped it in a cloth for the night. It would be tested in water the next day. But for now, it rested. That evening, as the crew gathered around the small cooking fire, the boy laid the paddle beside him like a companion. The woman offered a piece of sweetened yam, roasted and soft. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and salt, and the sea hummed in the background like a memory. The stars emerged again, and the wind shifted gently. The boy touched the paddle once more. It was heavier than he expected, but it felt right. Later, before sleep, he traced the wood with his thumb and whispered a small thank you. Not to the tree it once was, or the place it once belonged, but to the ocean that carried it here. He fell asleep thinking of waves, not crashing ones, just small ones, the kind a single paddle moves aside with every stroke, the kind that lead you forward. The night came soft and deep, curling around the voyagers like the folds of a woven mat. The island was quiet, the fire reduced to faint coals. The wind had stilled, and the sea once again became mirror-like, stretching out under a sky dusted with stars. The boy lay curled beside his paddle, the driftwood wrapped in cloth beside him like a story waiting to be opened. His breath slowed, his muscles softened. Sleep came gently, carrying him not into rest, but into another kind of voyage, one deeper than memory, older than song. In his dream, he was no longer himself. He was someone else, older, unfamiliar, yet somehow known. He stood barefoot on a shore not this one, with waves lapping at his toes and a sky thick with clouds. Behind him, a canoe still half-built. Before him, only water. No maps. No stories. Not yet. He was the first to dare. The first to follow the birds without knowing if they would return. The first to trust the wind not because it promised anything, but because it whispered a direction. He turned to face the sea, and began. There was no chant then. No palm leaf maps. No cell diagrams. No trail of others before him. Just instinct, just breath, just rhythm. The dream shifted. Now he, or the boy, or the memory of both, was in a canoe unlike any he had ever seen. It was wide yet narrow, crude yet graceful. Its sail was woven from bark. Its lines knotted with raw cord, creaked loudly. It bucked against the waves, but it moved. The stars above were different, arranged in unfamiliar constellations. Yet they shimmered with a familiar logic. Pattern not yet named. He paddled alone, but did not feel alone. There was wind, there was swell, there was silence. And within that silence, there was companionship of the sea, of the birds, of the sky. He dreamed of days and nights passing without count, of fish caught with bare hands, of storms endured by speaking softly to the ocean, of longing for land, not as a destination, but as an answer. And then, one morning, in that liminal dream space between light and waking, he saw it. A line on the horizon, faint, green, alive, land, the first land. The dream slowed, deepened, faded. The boy stirred on the mat, his limbs twitching slightly, his breath shallow. And then another vision. The first voyager, older now, seated beneath a tree, children at his feet, carving the shape of a star into the sand. He speaks without words, just gestures. He places a stone here, a shell there, a palm leaf pointing north, and the dream shifts again. Now the boy is watching from above, watching the first memory become many, watching the one voyager become 1,000, watching the first story branch out into islands, chants, tattoos, carvings, tools, names, watching the ocean become a map, not of places, but of trust. When the boy finally opened his eyes, dawn was touching the tops of the trees. The paddle beside him still smelled faintly of the sea. His fingers, when he flexed them, ached slightly, not from carving, but from carrying something. He sat up. The woman was awake, feeding the fire. The navigator, already near the canoe, ran his hands along the hull, and the boy rose slowly, not different, but changed. He looked out at the ocean, the sea that had been crossed, and thought perhaps he had met the one who crossed it first. Even if only in a dream, the morning unfolded like a leaf in slow sunlight, opening its layers one at a time. The ocean was gentle again, its surface stirred only by small fish near the shallows and the long, lazy breath of the tide. The wind, rested after the night, began to return, not rushing, not pulling, but nudging the trees and fluttering the edges of woven sails. It was time to move again, not to leave, but to circle, to return. The crew prepared the canoe with the same calm rhythm they had carried from the start. Bundles were checked, water was measured, the new paddle, the one shaped from driftwood, was tested in the shallows. It cut the water without resistance, as if it too had dreamed of this journey. The woman placed small charms along the center beam, carved shells, knotted fibers, a tiny polished stone. Not for magic, but for remembering. Every canoe carries stories. These would be added to the next ones. The boy was given a task. He was to gather shells. Not the brightest, not the largest, but the ones that carried voice. He walked the shore slowly, eyes scanning the sand, not rushing, letting the sea decide what stayed behind. A fragment of a spiral, pale and thin as parchment. A conch with its tip worn soft. A curved shard from something once whole. He gathered them in a folded leaf, rinsed them in the tide, then brought them back to the canoe. The navigator chose 3 and tied them with coconut cord to the front of the hull. Every return carries something new, he said. Not always what we planned, but always something. The shells would sing in the wind. That was their purpose. The canoe was launched not with fanfare, but with breath. A slow push from shore, a firm release from sand, a quiet welcome back to water. The crew paddled gently at first. The boy sat at the front this time, his new paddle guiding the nose of the canoe through the shallows, then into deeper blue. The island slipped behind them slowly. No one turned to watch it disappear, not because they didn't care, but because it didn't need watching. It was now a part of them. The voyage home, if one could call it that, followed no straight line. Curved. It wandered. They stopped at reefs where fish shimmered in schools. They paused near rocks where seabirds nested in craggy shelves. They passed other canoes at a distance. Exchanges of hand signs, nods, and long looks that said more than speech ever could. At one small islet, the crew went ashore to gather wood and fresh leaves. The boy found a strange shell there, ridged like the others, but marked with faint lines that looked almost like writing. He held it in his palm and turned it gently in the sun. "Keep it," the woman said. "It remembers something." That night, anchored in calm water, they sang. Not loud songs. Songs like the sea itself, soft, circling, patterned like waves. One voice would rise, then another would answer. Some verses were ancient, others improvised. The boy added a line about the paddle, another about the dream, another about the fire that may or may not have burned. No one corrected him. Stories are allowed to grow. The canoe rocked gently. Shells tied to the hull knocked lightly together, their sound as soft as breath. The stars above resumed their vigil, and below, the ocean accepted the return, not as an end, but as continuation. The boy slept beneath a half-furled sail, his hand resting on his paddle. The shell with the strange markings nestled in the cloth beside him. Tomorrow they would reach the island they had left, but they would not be the same, because now the canoe carried not only bodies, but new songs, new shapes, new shells, and a silence that had been learned, not given. The island appeared at dawn, wrapped in mist, as though the sea were reluctant to reveal it too soon. Trees peeked through the morning haze like quiet witnesses, their branches swaying softly in the slow breeze. The shoreline was familiar yet distant, not just in space, but in time. They had left this place only days before, yet now it felt changed. Or perhaps they were the ones who had changed. The canoe approached in silence. No songs were sung. Not yet. This was a moment for remembering. The navigator stood near the bow, hand resting lightly on the shell-lashed rope. His eyes scanned the beach, the path through the reef, the soft break in the trees where a small grove stood waiting. He nodded. "There," he said quietly. "The stone is still there." It was not large, not carved, not marked in any obvious way, but they all knew it. Flat, round, gray-black with age. It lay near the base of a twisted fig tree, half sunk into the earth, wrapped in roots like fingers. They had buried names beneath it before. Not bodies, not bones, just names. Spoken, remembered, placed like seeds into the soil of memory. When the canoe came to rest in the shallows, the boy stepped into the water and let his feet sink into the cool sand. He walked slowly, following the others up the path and into the grove. There the stone waited. The crew formed a circle around it, not close, but within reach. No one sat. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, the navigator stepped forward and placed a shell on the stone, one of the three tied to the canoe's hull. The wind caught its curve, and it turned slightly, as if to listen. He spoke one name, just one, softly, a name not heard during the voyage, a name not explained, but all understood it was part of the journey. The woman came next. She placed a folded leaf, damp from sea spray, beside the shell. She whispered two names, one familiar, one not. One carried in memory, one perhaps dreamed. The boy approached last. In his hand, the strange shell he had found on the islet, the one etched with faint, almost accidental markings. He placed it gently on the stone and leaned down. He did not know what name to give, so he gave none. He only breathed, and the stone accepted the breath. There were no tears, no mourning, only presence, only the deep, rich understanding that every voyage carries more than its destination. It carries what is lost and what is found, what is spoken and what is not. After a while, they sat near the grove, sharing dried fruit, sipping water from gourds warmed by morning light. The canoe rocked quietly in the shallows, its hull creaking softly as the tide began to shift. The navigator reached into a pouch and withdrew a small bone pick. With slow care, he began to scratch something into a palm bark scroll. Not words, not script, but a pattern. A spiral, a curve, a line interrupted. It was not meant to be read. It was meant to be carried. The woman hummed, almost absently, as she cleaned a fish caught that morning. The boy watched her hands move, swift and practiced. He thought of the stone, of the names, of the weight of saying nothing. "Why do we bury names?" he asked. She paused, then looked at him. "Because we are not meant to carry all of them forever," she said. "They must rest somewhere." He nodded. The wind moved through the trees above, rustling the leaves in waves. The sound reminded him of sails, of sleeping, of the quiet before storms. That afternoon, they covered the stone lightly with new sand, not to hide it, but to let it rest. The roots would remember where it was. The trees would know, and the sea would carry the memory back and forth across its surface, whispering it to other shores, other canoes, other boys. Before they left, the boy pressed his palm against the stone one last time. It was warm from sun, rough with time, and then he walked back to the canoe. He did not turn around. The voyage had not ended, only deepened. The canoe slipped once more into open water, its hull parting the sea with the same gentle grace it always had.
No fanfare, no drumbeat.
Only movement, smooth, slow, sure. The sail lifted, filled softly, and they began again. Behind them, the island receded. Not forgotten, not left behind, but absorbed. The trees would whisper their passing. Its sand would keep the shape of their footprints for a time, then let them go. That is how islands hold memory, briefly, softly, without clinging. Ahead, the sea stretched wide. There was no destination now, only direction. The boy sat with his new paddle across his knees, tracing its worn grain with his fingers. He no longer watched the horizon for islands or birds. He watched the water itself, the texture of the swells, the pause between wavelets, the slant of the light. He had learned to listen not for sound, but for presence. The woman sat beside him, her eyes half-lidded against the morning sun, singing quietly to herself. The tune had no beginning, no end, only flow. A lullaby for no one, or for everyone. The kind of song the ocean knows by heart. The navigator stood once more at the stern, his gaze sweeping the sky, the sea, the way the wind pressed against his cheekbone. He adjusted nothing. The canoe needed no correction. It moved exactly as it should. They did not speak much anymore. They did not need to. The canoe itself had become the language. The boy looked down into the sea. For a moment he saw only water. But then he saw more. A shape deep below, moving slowly in the current. A large fish, perhaps, or the shadow of a reef, or something else entirely, something unseen but known. He did not point it out. He simply watched, and then it was gone. But the feeling remained. The ocean remembers. It remembers every paddle stroke, every drop of water offered back to the waves. It remembers the songs sung to its swells. It remembers the names spoken over stones and the dreams that passed over its surface like low clouds. It remembers every voyager, not as individuals, but as movement, as rhythm. Even when they are gone, even when they are still. The boy closed his eyes and leaned back against the hull. He let the motion of the canoe cradle him once again, as it had so many nights before. He thought of the shell that now lived in the canoe's storage, the one with markings no one had explained. He thought of the fire he'd seen on the horizon, or dreamed of. He thought of the first voyager, whose name had been buried long ago, and whose memory now rocked gently in his own bones. And he thought of the sea, endless, patient, alive, not demanding, not cruel, but remembering. Even now, as the canoe moved quietly over its surface, the ocean remembered. The names, the silence, the salt, the songs. The boy felt sleep brushing at the edges of his mind. Not from fatigue, from peace. His breath slowed. The sun warmed his skin. The paddle rested beside him, waiting for the next current. The woman's song continued, softer now, like the wind, and the ocean rolled on. Not hurried, not still, just remembering,